Okay. Consider what has to change. Let's look from the Gospel of Matthew. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and throw it away. It is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. Are you ready to make a radical change? What are you tempted to do? We have to know. What is it, the temptation? Because the reality is that, if we look at the Ten Commandments or any examination of conscience, there's probably, a bunch of those things that we're not tempted to. Okay? And so we don't really have to focus so much on the things that we're not tempted for. What we need to focus is, what am I tempted to? What things, whether it's something from, the direct type of sins where you want to take from somebody else's that I can have, whatever, or whether it's the omission type or it's just an attitude towards someone, I can't love them for whatever reason and stuff. Whatever it is, we need to find in ourselves. What am I tempted to? Where is that temptation? So, also, what are the triggers? Okay? If anyone's familiar with AA, they talk about the acronym HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. They say that this is, if you're any one of those, if you're hungry, if you're lonely, you're angry or tired, then that's, kind of a danger time, because the propensity to want to fall back into the drink is going to be there and stuff, because you're not your full self when you have these. Now this isn't, only for those who are part of Alcoholics Anonymous stuff, but they have a good point. That's why I put it up here, is that, these could be our triggers. But we can have other triggers as well. We have a society that uses sexuality for everything, for entertainment, for music, for advertisement. And so, perhaps that's a trigger. I turn on the TV and I'm seeing things that, are causing a trigger effect that makes me want to move into a direction of a particular sin. Okay? And so we can have all kinds of different things that are triggers. But definitely that's something that we need to think about. When I'm tempted and I fall, what was the prelude to that? How did I get myself in a state where I was vulnerable to the temptation? And so, have I just gone through, a bunch of stuff that just exhausted me, and so when the temptation came, I just didn't have the strength. I just didn't really want to fight because I was tired. Okay, that might be, part of the trigger. Okay, so we have to understand, this is part of that examination of conscience. Take a little step more, not just see what did you do, but what led you into that? How did you get into that? What were the triggers? What were the stepping stones that got you to the sin? Because the reality is that, yes, there can be the totally unexpected out of the blue temptation that just drops in front of me. But by and large, most temptations are tiptoed to. Okay? We kind of move in a direction, little bit, and then we find ourselves there. So what were those stepping stones? How did we get to the moment of temptation? And so, an examination of our triggers. What sets me off? What are your habits? Okay? And what are we doing as our day-to-day life, our lifestyles, our habits, that, are any of those influencing and leading us into temptation? And we have, as part of this self-examination. And, is my lifestyle or is my habits, bringing me to that moment of temptation? So these are things that we have to think about. Like I said, we have examination of conscience, which we need to do before we go to confession. We need to say, well, what did I do wrong? Well, if we want to fight temptation, okay, we need to think about what gets us to the temptation, because the examination of conscience looks at what we did after we failed, in the temptation. We were tempted and we did it, and now we got to confess it. Okay, so we need to take it a couple steps earlier and say, okay, what gets me to the temptation, and see if we can circumvent that. Okay? What are your appetites? Okay? You know, to some degree that's, you know, similar to what are we tempted to, but, you know, as human beings, you know, we do have, you know, essentially passions, appetites, desires for certain things that we think will make us happy or bring us comfort or whatever. And so what are these appetites? You know, what am I drawn to? What am I hungry for? Not just food, you know, but where do my appetites lead me? Okay. Once again, are you ready to make a change, even if the change is hard or painful? The reality is that change doesn't come easy. Okay? It's not easy to make a change. You know, and the reality is that it usually takes a lot of effort and a lot of work to make a change. You know, a lot of you, well, not a lot of you, but some of you probably have heard me tell this story. You know, when I was younger, when I was in the military, when I was in the Air Force, I picked up a real gutter mouth. I spoke in obscenities like you couldn't believe. You know, it wasn't just occasionally using an obscenity, but there was never a sentence where I didn't use 5 or 6 obscenities in it. Okay, I mean, I was prolific in using vulgarity and obscenities. And that had become my way of talking. It wasn't a conscious thing, it was a habitual thing, okay? You know, and in its own way, it was my pet thing, because when people would point it out, people would, you know, sit there at times and they would count. And they'd say, in the last 2 minutes, you just used that bad word 60 times. How did you do that? You know, I don't know, that's just the way I talk. That's just me. That's the way I converse, okay? Now, changing a speaking pattern is not easy. It's not easy to retrain yourself to not use a whole set of vocabulary that has become instinctual, that you don't even think about, it just rolls and fits itself into the sentence. It takes a lot of work. But change is possible. I mean, thankfully, you know, I think it's been at least over 20 years since I've used any of it. You know? And so, you know, you can change, but it does take work. It does require effort. Are you willing to make a radical change in your life, habits, or attitudes? What would you cut out? Obviously not your eye, okay, but something else. I mean, that passage from Matthew's Gospel is hard-hitting. You know, it's very graphic. You know, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. The idea is not to get mad, okay? The idea is to emphasize how important it is to be willing to make a radical change, to stop whatever it is that is, you know, causing you to sin. And so, you know, if the internet is the source of your sin, you know, is it worth always falling into sin to have it? Can you make the adjustments? Okay, and quick excuses will come on, well, I need it for work, and then, well, okay, can you streamline it so that it's only used for work and work alone? You know, what can you do to guarantee that the sin, that's not going to be your source of sin anymore? Can you cut that element out? You know, material goods, okay? Maybe your thing is, you know, an obsessive greed, you know, that, you know, I need to have everything and I don't feel good unless I do, okay? Well, you know, can you address that? Do you really need to have everything? Okay? Every time you look at a catalog, does it all have to be ordered? You know, a grudge, okay? You know, this person wronged me, and I just can't forgive them. You know, they broke my heart, they hurt me, whatever. You know, so I can't ever forgive them. Really? Can you let go of that hurt? Can you cut that out and allow love to come back in? You know? What needs to be done? Sometimes the change is huge. Change is never easy. Guess what? Sometimes not sinning hurts. Did you ever think about that? But it's true. If you really want something, if that passion or that desire or that emotion that's got you having that grudge, whatever it might be, it can hurt not to sin. Denying yourself something that you are really hungry for, that you really, really want, can hurt. At a moment of temptation, you can actually feel like, if I don't have this right now, right this minute, I'm going to die. I can't live without it. That's how it can feel. And to say no, not to give yourself that, it's going to hurt. And so, yeah, sometimes it can hurt not to sin. Sometimes love hurts. Love is a beautiful, wonderful thing. But with it can come pain, sorrow. The sacrifices we make for love can hurt. The Blessed Mother at the foot of the cross, witnessing her son's crucifixion. She loves him, and she's in agony. Love hurts sometimes. But we have to understand that. Because the temptations that we face are always promising something good. Of course, it never delivers it. But it's promising to make us feel good, make us feel better, get us over whatever it is that we think, it's going to satisfy us. And so, part of the difficulty is that if saying no hurts, or loving God enough to say no hurts, okay? That might make it more difficult to say no. Because we are trying to avoid the pain. That's why we're going towards the temptation. We have to understand that. We have to understand that, yes, part of our love can require us to sacrifice. And sometimes it is painful. Sometimes it does hurt. Sacrifice the things that keep us from God. This is one of those things that we have to understand. That yes, whatever the temptations are, whatever the sins are, that are leading us away from God, we have to understand that that's what it's doing. We're being led away from God. And so, let's sacrifice those things so that we can be with God. Can you love God enough to change? And the next thing, we're going to get into some practical things to do, but this is one of the most important things. If we are struggling, if we feel the pain of not doing the sin, if we realize that this is hard, it's difficult, can we love God enough not to sin? To say, yes, it hurts. Yes, this is hard. But I want to love God enough not to do this. To hold on to that love for God. Because at the end of the day, this is all about love. Sin is about not loving. And learning not to sin is about loving. Okay. Just a quick little explanation here, because sometimes there's a little bit of confusion. In the Catholic Church, we have the traditions of mortifications and penance. Okay, and mortifications are different practices where we self-impose, some type of sacrifice or some type of something that may not necessarily pleasant. One of the things you might have seen in movies or in television shows, you see like in the Middle Ages, people whipping themselves and stuff. And okay, that was, kind of a form of a mortification. But the thing of it is that if you're doing mortifications and penance as a self-punishment or out of self-loathing, oh, I'm a sinner, I'm horrible, I need to be beaten, then you're not doing anything good. You're just doing another sin. Okay? Mortification isn't about hating ourselves because we're sinners. It isn't about punishing ourselves because we're sinners. No. Okay? We're in the season of Lent, and we're all doing some type of mortification. We don't eat meat on Fridays. We fasting on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, and most of us sacrifice some type of something during the season. And that's a mortification, okay? We're denying ourselves something that we like, something that we want, okay? And in doing that, that helps us to learn a discipline. We get to learn how to say no to something and yes to God. Whatever it is that we're sacrificing, we're saying throughout the season of Lent, through these 40 days, okay, we're learning how to say no. And that's one of the things we have to do. We have to learn to say no, to say, hey, this is something I really like. And this is why I say a lot of times when I'm talking to the kids before Lent, I say, you know, giving up broccoli or cauliflower that you don't like is not a sacrifice, okay? You have to pick something that you actually like, okay? And when you pick something that you like, then throughout that season, you're going to be confronted over and over again with the opportunity to say no to whatever it is and yes to God. And in doing that, we increase our ability to say no, and we grow in our love for God, because every time we say no and we say yes to God, that's our loving God. Loving God more than whatever it is, the candy bar, the cookies, the Coke, whatever it is that we gave up, okay? We love God more than that. And so for 40 days of Lent, we practice that. But we don't have to limit it to just Lent, okay? The reality is that, you know, penance and mortification is a part of our Catholic tradition. And, you know, disciplining ourselves to say no. You know, and however we do it, whatever the practices might be, okay? You know, that's the purpose. The heart of it is to grow in our love for God. If we're doing it for other reasons, then we're doing it wrong, okay? And so I just wanted to be clear about that. Also penance, just one of the things. When you go to confession, the priest gives you a penance. Penance is not punishment, okay? Not being punished by that penance. The priest tells you to say, you know, 3 Our Fathers and 2 Hail Marys. That's not a punishment, okay? The penance is a restoration. Sin damages. Sin hurts. And so the penance is there to restore, to bring healing, to help restore the damage that's done. We're forgiven already at that end of the confession. We go to the church, and whatever the priest has asked us to do, it's not a punishment, okay? And so mortifications and penances are not punishment. We don't punish ourselves for our sins. It's not what we're doing here. That's not what this class is about, okay?